I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside. It's so comfortable and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off-road. The guy managed the group. He was like, what are you doing in this beautiful car? I'm like, I'm going off-road. He's like, are you sure? Because you can use one of ours. And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, no, we're going to do this. And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability, as well as its robust interior, are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
These days, we're all investors, trying to be smart with our money despite our worst impulses. But at iShares, we believe that deep down inside of every investor is a better investor. One that's just waiting to be let out. Explore iShares ETFs and insights and let your best investor out. Visit iShares.com for more information.
I told Jay, the producer of this podcast, I wanted to focus more on interesting stories that excite me. I wanted something that, was a little bit seamier, where it's harder to find these stories. Like, I'm always curious about people who hack other people's computers, into their email accounts, into their Instagrams, into their phone. I'm a former developer, hacker myself, but nowhere near at this level. Jay, how did you find this guy?
Through a friend. He recommended me Joseph Harris. His stories is crazy. Like, who would have hacked someone else's account at 12 years old?
And he teaches us exactly how he did everything. Yes. So I actually am a little nervous. I hope people don't use this episode for nefarious purposes, but it is interesting and it also is helpful to protect yourself. And yes. I've had other cybersecurity people on before, but nothing like this. This is like the how-to guide. This is the White Hat Bible. Thank you, Jay, for finding this guest. So, Joseph Harris, thanks for coming on the podcast.
No problem.
I heard some of your stories, not all of them. I'm sure you have many to tell, but you started basically getting into, let's call it respectfully, the cybersecurity space when you were 12 years old.
Yes. Before I got into finding bugs and the actual hacking side of things, I was what we call a social engineer, breaking into emails.
But before you were doing all this, so when you were 11 or 10?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. 11 or 10, very young age. I had a fascination with online game accounts, and I wanted these rare accounts. So my logic was, let me try to break into these accounts via social engineering techniques. And that's how I got started.
And so I guess the benefit is, if you play that game, or maybe some game account has huge numbers of, I don't know, hero
items,
points or whatever,
right,
that they could cash in for armor and powers and all that kind of stuff. So you could play the game, so you could defeat more people in the game. And so it would be a big item to have one of these accounts.
That's correct. And honestly, because the items are so big, usually these items translate into real world value. People are willing to pay real money for them.
Sure. Yeah, no, there's exchanges for people's accounts.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. 100%.
So how would you steal someone's game account at the age of 12?
Well, at the age of 12, it started by just calling the game company and sort of just seeing what information they needed to give me the account. So they might be like, oh, what's your first and last name and address? And what's the email and username? And so that's how I first sort of got into it. But then eventually the game companies were starting to get a little more strict. Okay, we're not necessarily just going to give out the accounts. I think there was one time where they recognized my voice too, like, Joseph, you've called here a few times this week. Please stop, you know? So then I started.
But wait, hold on a second. Did you get someone's game account and like what happened? Like, did they protest? Did you have to give it back or like what happened?
I think they gave it to me, and I had pulled this off a few times, and eventually I think they banned the accounts forever. So I had gotten away with a few accounts, and then because I was being persistent, still calling for other game accounts, they just started banning me forever.
I see. So they kind of figured out what you were up to and what you were asking for, and so they would recognize when you called. But did those people ever get their game accounts back, or they were just like stuck?
I think they were just stuck. I think I maintained control of the game account, but it was banned forever, essentially.
Were you able to sell any accounts before they banned it?
Oh yeah, I definitely was able to sell one. They would go for a couple $100, something like that. So I definitely got away with it that way. But then I was starting to think, okay, well, why don't I just target their emails? Because then I don't have to deal with the support. Instead, I could just go through a different support and just reset their password that way. And that's when I started getting into calling up Yahoo, AOL, and finding ways to get into these accounts.
And what years? Roughly what years were this around?
I would say 2010 is when it started, and it went 2010 up until 2018.
So it was pretty. I mean, this is like it's pretty hard to hack someone's email account, particularly like I would imagine Yahoo, AOL. They've had years to fix any bugs. But like, so what would you do?
Typically, I would just AOL, which was notoriously bad for security. To reset someone's AOL password, all you needed was their address, basically. So you needed their first and last name and their address. Now, there's sites like White Pages and Spokeo where you can basically look up anyone's address. Especially back in 2010, there's just a list of everyone's address you could get almost always for free. So I would look up their first and last name, do some detective work, find their address, then call AOL and get them to reset the account for me. Stuff like that.
Wow. So you would call AOL and say, listen, I don't know what my password is. That was the only email account I used. So you can't even like email me a new, to a new email address. What can I do? And you knew what they would ask. They'd ask, well, just tell us, the past 3 places you've lived. And you would tell them and they'd be like, okay, here's a reset link.
Typically, they would say, what's your security question answer? And I'd say, oh, I must have written something down that was wrong or something. And then they'd be like, okay, well, don't worry, Joseph, or whatever person I'm impersonating. And then they would ask for, whatever, Carrie. Typically, there was some times where I called us a female and they just didn't care, I guess. Like, Jessica, huh? Okay, sure, we'll reset the password for you. But I would verify the address and then they would reset the account.
So you got into someone's email, or you got into a couple people's email accounts. Did you ever see anything interesting?
I typically was so laser focused on the accounts that I didn't really think, okay, what are you really emailing about? I was more, let's get the email, let's secure the email, and let's take over the account.
And then what would you do with the account?
Well, the account, I would then sell it for cash. I would sell it I used a site called xat.com or Zat. And there was a little chat box, and I typically had customers who would come to me and buy it from real life cash.
Well, why would somebody want to buy someone else's email account?
Oh, they wouldn't buy the email. They want to buy that account that was linked to that email. So I got into the email, but now that I own the email, how do I reset the person's account? I do a forgot password on their account and then reset the account that way because the email's tied to the account.
Oh, and these are like game accounts?
Yeah, exactly.
I see. So this is how you would sell. This is how you continue to sell game accounts.
Right, correct.
I got it. And so what about, like, how long would the email be kind of in your hands in the sense that I imagine the person who owned the email would figure out a way to get it back?
Well, typically I had some tricks up my sleeve to basically make sure they wouldn't get it back. For Yahoo, I could ask to speak to a manager and get them to change the original security questions on file. And if I did that, when they called, hey, what was the name of your first pet? Well, that's not the answer I set up. And then Yahoo would just refuse to give them the email back. And the same would go for AOL. I could get the original security question changed. And I could also get that zip code on file, say, hey, listen, that's not my address anymore. Update their zip code. And they couldn't get their AOL back either.
Wow. Okay. And we're going to describe many more things, but let's just reel it back a second because this is so interesting. Like, Where are you from? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Kansas City, Missouri. I've been born and raised, lived there my whole life.
And like, what did your parents do?
My mom was a school teacher, and my dad was on disability most of my life. He did do a few odd jobs in here and there, but he was basically on disability. So it wasn't like I was from a super rich family, or we were kind of lower class family. Didn't have too much money growing up, but they were both good parents to me and raised me well.
And did they know what you were up to at this time, or like what did they? I mean, again, by the way, a lot of this. I mean, there's other stuff you did later, which is even more serious. But a lot of this stuff you're beginning with, you're 12 years old. It's hard to know what's going on, what's right, or I mean,
Yeah, I mean, that's such an early stage of development still, and you're getting this reward factor from getting money off doing these acts. So that gives you sort of a little boost in confidence.
and you could justify it's just a game. You're not
Yeah,
hurting anybody.
exactly.
So, I mean, I'm not condoning this, but I could see how a 12-year-old could not understand all the issues and consequences, and there was probably no need to tell your parents what you were up to because
Right.
they nobody was reporting you. You weren't getting in trouble.
Exactly.
And just to kind of skip around, like what what are you doing right now?
Well, right now I'm still in the hacking space, but I do it ethically. So I look for bugs in companies or vulnerabilities. Typically, I use tools to look through the thing and try different techniques to break into email providers or phone carriers, just finding flaws in websites. My area of expertise is web hacking. So that involves all stuff web related, like exploiting HTTP requests, stuff like that.
So I want to get back to this and a little bit more of the how to, but let's go back to your kind of evolution as a hacker. So a lot of this stuff is like, as you mentioned earlier, is the social engineering kind where you call people up, you pretend to be someone else, and you're able to kind of figure out the ways in which you can get information out of people, enough information to then use it in a practical way to steal someone's email account or game account or
Correct.
whatever. And then you evolved into ultimately using real coding skills to find bugs and vulnerabilities where you could hack into websites and so on. So
That's correct.
those are like the two ends of the spectrum of hacking.
Correct.
So what happened next? So you're stealing the game accounts. You're doing what made you stop doing that? Because that's still like a lucrative business, I think, selling game accounts.
I mean, I was still doing it for years to come. I was focusing on accounts that I could sell for money. But then I sort of got into the side of like actually finding vulnerabilities, because it's a lot easier to find a vulnerability that straight up takes over an email than it is to call up the email provider.
Did calling up the email provider, did they ever kind of get smarter about it?
There was times where they get smarter, but typically if I kept calling them and I could get lucky, maybe after a few tries, maybe I didn't have the correct answers, but maybe it took just a rep that wasn't quite on point to slip up and give you the account. But there was always chances where I couldn't get the email. That like it worked a lot of the time, but there were times where they were too secure. I couldn't find a way past it. There's security questions or something.
And do you think you can do this now?
I mean, I saw recently Yahoo has a call service now for paid customers. So I feel like if I was given the chance today, I think I could figure something out, to be honest. I feel like companies like Yahoo and AOL they might have uptight their security a bit more, but I think they're still kind of living in past security methods. Like typically when you think of Hotmail and Gmail, there is no call option to reset the account. It relies on your IP, your alternate emails, but Yahoo and AOL still rely on calling up on the phone to get your account back. And that's where human error falls in.
Are there other old services like, I don't know, Juno or Mail.com?
Yeah, and speaking of that, I've actually found a bug in Juno recently that I reported.
Wow, so people still use Juno email accounts.
Yeah.
I remember their IPO in like 1999.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, they still use them. I think it's not as big anymore, but I still found something that could have let me take over Juno accounts, and I reported that earlier this year.
Well, okay, and I definitely want to talk about the bug bounties. So you kept doing this, but then when did you start like actual coding and real, let's call it real hacking as opposed to social engineering?
Yeah. I would say I got into like real hacking in about 2014. I'm not saying I was good at it yet. I was able to sort of piece together certain things and find my first vulnerability was one that I heard about, but I didn't know how to do it. But I spent like a day looking and I figured it out. It was something real simple, like changing a radio value from 1 to 2, something just really basic. But it led to me being able to send calls to a phone, which I could intercept and then reset an account for.
Okay, wait. Let's start over because I want to understand this. So you started hacking into what to find what?
I mean, I was typically looking for bugs in email providers, bugs that either expose sensitive information or bugs that let me get an upper hand into breaking into the account.
So like your first one was what?
My first one that I found was just something that allowed me to send a call instead of a text, and then I could intercept the call and reset someone's email. So basically, there was 2 call options. To reset an email, you needed to send to a text to the phone, which I couldn't get, or I could send a call to their number, but it wouldn't give you the call option. So my first bug was just simply modifying the post request so it gave a call option instead of a text option. And then I got your phone provider to call forward the text to me, so then I could just use that code to reset their email.
And how would you like, okay, let me just guess. I'm just playing around here. I don't know how to do this or anything, but I'm just thinking out loud. So would you be listening at the, let's call them virtual ports of the main server of the email provider?
Well, it was an API call. I think if I remember correctly back then, it was basically just an API that sent the code to the phone. So I would be looking at the HTTP traffic and I'd be intercepting that. And I would grab that post request to send the code and then alter the post request to do a call instead.
And where would the HTTP request be coming from?
Well, back then I used tamper data to look at HTTP traffic, but I mean, you can do it right now. If you just inspect element and then go to the network tab, you can literally see every single HTTP traffic going through.
But how would you know? I mean, there's so much HTTP traffic. How would you know it was from the email provider that you wanted?
Well, you would see that it was from the domain Google. You would see it's an account.google, and you would see that it would say in the post data that it's sending the request. So
I see. So you would monitor basically some network hub, I guess. And
yeah, just the HTTP traffic being sent up, and I would modify the post request data that's being sent out. So instead of sending call to SMS, I'm changing it to radio 2, which means it's going to do a call to the phone instead of a text.
Right, I see. So how would you be listening to the HTTP traffic?
I mean, it's public display. It's not like it's something that's hidden. That stuff can always be captured with a web debugger as the requests are being sent out. Like I mentioned just now, if you go to Chrome and inspect and then go to the network tab and then enter anything, all that traffic is being logged as you make the request. So it's not like it's private information. Anytime I make a request to a server or do something, there's going to be HTTP traffic that's public to be logged.
But you were watching basically all HTTP traffic and filtering out Google.
I was looking at all HTTP traffic for that Google, and then I was looking for the right request that had the data that I needed to modify to be able to send out the request with a modified parameter.
I got it. So then you would basically then get the reset link, reset the password, and now you have the email account.
That's correct. Yes.
And so I imagine that's fairly straightforward. Were a lot of people doing this? It seems like you could basically, if you're patient long enough, you could basically get everyone's email account.
Yeah, that's sort of the idea of it. There was some of these bugs that were in the early days where you wouldn't see this kind of like low level of bug back then, but I mean now, but back then it was just notoriously there was stuff like that just worked. That nowadays companies are a lot more secure. They're not going to just have something like that. They're going to have proper access control around their APIs and stuff.
But I'm amazed though. Even 2010, it's not like those are early days. I mean,
yeah, I know. That's what's interesting. I mean, personally, I found one of my first other bugs that I found was another Google one. So I found within the course of a year, I had found 2 Gmail related bugs. The other one was with, well, if you want me to go into it now,
yeah, of course.
So the other one was basically making it appear as if I had signed in before. So back in 2015, Google's reset form relied heavily on IP address and cookies to basically reset your form. So basically, if it had reset as if you appeared to sign in before, it would reset the account for you. So basically, if I today say I'm in 2015, I'm logged into my Gmail, and then I do a forgot password on my Gmail. The recovery form is going to recognize my IP. It's going to recognize my device. It's going to allow me to quickly reset because it shows on their end I'm already signed in. So what I found a trick where I was signed in. I can make it appear as if I was signed into someone else's Gmail. So now the recovery form is favoring me as if I'm signed into the account right now and giving me either easier options to reset the account.
Would you have to know their IP address?
No, I wouldn't need to do that. So, but it may look like my session cookies and my IP was already attached to that Gmail, even if I've never signed into their account before.
I see. So they basically wouldn't verify that the IP address matches the email address. They just needed to see that this format, basically, that here's an email address, here's the IP address we've seen before, here's the cookie we've seen before. Now we're good.
Yeah, exactly. And the way it looked on the server's end was, hey, this person is signed into this Google account right now. Let's trust them. We'll reset the account for him manually. So,
And you would do that by just manipulating the request, like
yeah,
the HTTP
exactly,
request.
exactly. That was sort of the gist of it. But this was more just first I would go to the account, and then later on I could go back and it would appear as if I was signed in before. So it would briefly take a period to register my IP on the account, but then I could come back and the account would start recognizing me as if I owned it before.
That's fascinating. And so, how many accounts did you kind of get this way?
Probably a decent amount. Like I would say over 10 accounts. This was a good way that worked for about a month before Google finally patched it.
And did they patch it because people were complaining, like they were onto you, or did they patch it?
I remember going after the email Godzilla at Gmail and just straight up taking it. And I think it was actually an employee's account because I saw stuff relating to Google there. So I think I targeted just the wrong email address and it happened to be a Google employee because I started going after the cool names on Gmail, like something like Godzilla or cool, or it's 6 characters up, but just those sort of like simple names, like simple at Gmail. And I think one of the people just happened to be one of the people that worked for Google. And so unfortunately, I think that's what kind of led to it being patched.
It would be good if you knew who it was. If you remember who it was, we could just write them right now and say, "Hey, can you come on the podcast?"
That would be good. It was just Godzilla at gmail.com. That was their email. I was just targeting them because I thought the name was cool. I'm a huge Godzilla fan.
And so you think that person worked at, well, if they work at Google though, they would have like their email would be like googlemail.com instead of gmail.com.
Yeah, exactly. It would be at google.com. But the thing is, I think they must have been one of those early people that registered for Gmail in 2004. I remember seeing they had like another email that was at Google, but I think they just happened to have Gmail. I mean, you can have a regular Gmail address and be a Google employee. You know?
Right. Probably for the best. So this way, when you're not a Google employee, you still have your email. But that's fascinating. So you think they kind of said, "Hey, there's something weird here. We got to patch this," and they found it.
Correct. Yeah, I think so. This one wasn't too complicated to find, so I think because it was just making all of a sudden these accounts were appearing as if you had signed in before, and then you could reset them through the form. So then Google must have caught on that emails were disappearing and then figured out the cause of the problem and then patched it. But it still took a month, which typically stuff like that is patched a lot quicker. Like there was an AOL one that got patched in a few days that was pretty severe like that.
Well, I'll tell you an email one that I did in the 90s. There was a port that was just like, so basically a computer you can think of virtually as this big listening machine.
Right.
It has all these ports, what's called ports, but they're like windows where things fly in and out. And one port is for all communication that's email. Another port's for all communication that's HTTP or the web.
Yeah.
Another one might be
HTTP.
a port for logging into the computer. And so if you knew kind of the language of that port, you could talk to the port. So you could say, "Hi, I'm an email. Here's my name. Here's my subject. Here's my text." And most computers, this is in the 90s, most computers didn't really, there was zero security. So you could just pretend to be anybody you wanted. Like I would write emails to friends of mine, just joking around, saying I'm like the legal team at mtv.com and you need to call us right now because you're in big trouble. And
Yeah.
I would do stuff like that because you could just be anybody. You could be like Bill Clinton then and send emails to people. And I don't know why the most email servers had that hole. Now they don't, of course, but
Right.
that was like a common type of hack then.
Yeah, yeah. And it's like, I mean, the stuff like that is still how it's done. Like port 80, obviously, which is listening to the HTTP traffic. So that's how Google listens into, that's how I'm capturing HTTP. I'm listening to that port 80. So yeah, it's somewhat similar with stuff like that. I actually had an interesting Yahoo one that was, I was able to send an email from any Yahoo, but that was like later on, like 2016, 2017.
Oh my gosh, I love these clothes. Mizzen and Main. That's Mizzen and Main. It really is the most comfortable work clothes. Travel clothes. I had to travel this whole week. I'm traveling for a week and a half, and I just took Mizzen and Main clothes with me. Close out 2023 in style with comfortable, breathable, packable, and machine washable pieces from Mizzen and Main. As you wrap up your year-end goals, enjoy a Mizzen and Main dress shirt that you can wear confidently. I like that they've very, very just nice, solid colors. I don't really like to get all fancy in patterns and everything, although they do have some pattern shirts, but very comfortable clothes, stretchable pants. It's just super comfortable, but they look professional, and you can wear them casually or professionally. I like some of their flannel shirts or untuck shirts. I love untuck. I never tuck in. So again, whether you're shopping for a special someone or giving yourself the gift you really want, I just buy myself gifts. Mizzen and Main is the perfect gift for any guy who works, travels, and or cares about looking and feeling great. As you could tell by my many photos across the internet, I care about looking fantastic. I'm practically a model. And let's be honest, every guy loves to look great. So again, shop now at mizzenandmain.com and save 20% when you spend $130 or more using promo code James. That's promo code James at Mizzen and Main, Mizzen and Main.com. You know what I love about fantasy sports is that even though I'm not going to be a great basketball player or a baseball player or a football player or whatever, I feel like I get to participate and make decisions and use my knowledge of these different leagues or these different sports to compete. So it's like I can pick my team or I can pick my favorite players, and I could use my knowledge to make predictions and maybe even make money. So with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League on Prize Picks. This is a league created specifically for combo projections that include two or more players from different sports or leagues. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, who's also been a guest on this podcast, and I've been a guest on his? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries for some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Look, Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. What? So I love playing it. I love anywhere where I can use analytical ability with my interests to demonstrate some skill and maybe make some money. And I like the game-like aspect. I do wish they had chess as a category on prizepicks.com, but I'll settle for what they've got. Maybe I should make my own fantasy chess league. But in any case, I love Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/James. Use code James for a first deposit match up to $100. That's the easiest $100 you're ever going to make. So that's prizepicks.com/James and use code James. Daily fantasy sports made easy. So you're doing these Google hacks, and it's just to get the game accounts of these people.
Right. It's
You
strictly for
never
the
like tried to get like your girlfriend's or your
no,
parents' email, right? Or
no,
teachers,
never
or
like that. No, I was strictly for these game accounts.
is that how you kind of like sort of justified it to yourself?
Yeah, at this point, I'm someone who was a little shy as a kid, and I'm getting sort of an ego boost from taking these accounts. It makes me feel like I mean, it's wrong, obviously, at this, like, even thinking back to now, I'm like, how was I so blind by what I was doing? But as a kid, it's something that I'm becoming good at. It gives a kid a like strange sense of power if I'm suddenly able to just take someone's email account. And so I think I was just kind of justifying it as, well, they're just game accounts. It makes me feel good to do this because it's sort of an accomplishment. And I think that was my justification for it. But obviously, looking back on now, there's a lot of regret and stuff around it.
And you were making money. You were selling
Right.
these game accounts. Like, I mean, I had a paper route as a kid, but I didn't make like a couple $100 selling like someone's account. Like, you were probably pretty loaded for however old you were.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I could buy the new games on Xbox. So, I just order it to my house and stuff. My mom set me up a PayPal student account, which if you're over 13, you can use PayPal as a minor. And so I had a bunch of money in my little PayPal student account. Not a bunch, but a couple thousand. I'm like 13, 14, 15.
I mean, that's amazing. So okay, what was the next evolution in your skill set or your wants or your needs or whatever? Were you playing the games or you didn't care about that?
I wasn't really playing the games. I was more fascinated by the account.
I see. And it's interesting that like were you reading places on how to hack or they gave you ideas on how to do these different things?
Uh, yeah, I was reading resources. Like, there's a lot of like hacker resources, stuff like Burp Suite wasn't as big now, but obviously now you can go to Portswigger and do labs and stuff like that. Portswigger.net, which is basically just I don't know if you've heard of Burp Suite.
No.
It's basically like a penetration testing software that's used by a lot of companies. It's what I personally use these days, but they have a lot of labs and stuff to learn different types of exploiting and stuff like that. A lot of their labs are a little outdated now, but that's how I learned stuff.
So okay, tell me the names of these websites again. So what's the BERT one?
Well, portswigger.net, basically it's the company that produces Burp Suite, which is basically just a web application for testing security and stuff like that. Like, you can do scans, you can obviously intercept the HTTP traffic, you can intercept web sockets, of course, too.
I see. So if I'm making a website, for instance, I can use this service to see if I'm missing any basic security
Right,
flaws.
yeah. Like, I mean, it will, there's also like Alyssa list, like it will help you. Yeah, exactly, 100%. But you can also do the more manual stuff. Like, before I started, I use Burp Suite now, but back then I was using little Firefox extensions. I wasn't at the skill level I am now. I was still pulling these things off, but I wasn't as tech savvy as I am now with it.
What did you do next? What sort of made you more tech savvy?
I think it's just more learning about just how stuff work, HTTP traffic, stuff like that. What makes websites tick? This works for that reason. You're starting to see things work, but you're not exactly having understanding why it works. So then that prompts you to do more research into, okay, why does this work like this? And then you sort of get a more learning, and then you're able to learn how to exploit things furthermore.
Like, what was a tipping point that was like something you learned that was a big advancement in your knowledge?
I think it was just finally getting a better understanding about just post requests, API calls, stuff like that. Learning. I remember a big breakthrough for me was when I realized that a common technique was IDORs, which is an insecure direct object reference, which is basically an API or something sets a user parameter, which can be, if they don't set proper access control around that user parameter, I can enter anyone's user ID and then we'll pump out the response data or possibly let me modify their account details.
I see. So it's like an advanced version of, let's say someone is on a social media site and labels a post private, but if the site was set up in such a way that if you knew the exact URL, you could still get it, as opposed to clicking. Like, if you clicked on the link, it might not work, but if you knew the exact URL, somehow it would work. Like, if sites forget to kind of patch up those types of flaws.
Yeah, well, let me just make a scenario right here for you. Let's say Twitter's not going to have this, but let's just say I'm going to make a tweet on Twitter. I type something up, I tweet, and once again, I'm looking at that HTTP traffic. Let's see, it says I'm tweeting from user ID 1334. And now, what happens if I modify that user ID parameter to 1333? If there's proper access control, it's going to say access denied. I'm not going to be able to send us that person. But if there's not improper access control, I'm going to be able to send us that user ID instead of my own.
I see. So potentially that means like you could log in or you could
You tweet us that person, you could view their information. So that's typically the idea behind iDoors.
like when suddenly someone releases all of like, I don't know, a famous person's photos, like Kim Kardashian's photos all released. Is that one of the ways they do it maybe? Like going on to
I think stuff like that's typically social engineering, breaking into the iCloud and then leaking the photos that way. I don't think there could be some technical side to that, but I think that's more through social engineering. And I knew some guys when I was into this stuff that that's what they do. They'd SIM swap the phone of the person and then they would break in their iCloud via the text message and then they would leak their nudes or whatever they were doing. I never personally was into that, but
what's a SIM swap?
so a SIM swap is when one person has a phone and I want their number, and I trick that cell phone provider to transfer their SIM data over to my SIM card that I control, and now I can receive their texts and calls and all that stuff.
So okay, I'm just trying to understand. So in a phone, there's usually a SIM card, which kind of is your identity,
Exactly.
and that's how a phone knows who you are.
Yes.
And so is that SIM card encodable? So you could take someone's SIM card information and put it on your SIM card, so now it looks like their SIM card.
Well, basically, the idea is you're tricking the AT&T, the T-Mobiles. You're tricking them to say, "Hey, I have a new SIM card. Can you transfer my identity to this new SIM card?" And when they do that, suddenly you have control over their cell phones, their text, all that stuff.
And how would you do that? Because I would think they would know, oh no, this person just used the SIM card 10 seconds ago, or this is not the real SIM card.
Yeah, they typically don't, but they typically just ask for information, like to verify you are who you are. Back when I was doing it, they would ask for last four of social. So you would get someone's last four of social, and then you'd be able to call and they'd manually switch it for you. Even if they see it's active, they're not going to question it because you verified yourself as the account holder.
I see. So it would be social engineering. You'd go to like the phone store and say, hey, I lost my old phone. Here's my new SIM card.
Well, you wouldn't even have to do that. You would just have to call up their support department and say, hey, this is my number. This is my name. Okay, let's verify some details. Oh, I verify that details. Transfer it to this ICD, which would be the SIM card. And they would ask for your SIM number and you would read it off. And then they would activate the service on that SIM card, which you would then have in your phone. And now you're getting their text.
I kind of feel like stuff like that, unfortunately, is still possible because I don't think the phone companies really are good on security.
Yeah, 100%. That stuff, I still see stuff like that on the news all the time. SIM swapping is still a very big technique that people do. So yeah, that stuff's still possible, 100% to this day.
Were you doing that? You mentioned like other people you knew were doing like celebrities SIM swapping so they could get photos and all that kind of stuff. Were you doing any SIM swapping at all?
Yeah, I was definitely doing SIM swapping. And on top of that, I was looking for bugs that expose that information I needed to be able to do a SIM swap. So there was a time with Verizon where they had account number is all you needed to as a verification method. And I found a JavaScript variable that disclosed the account number. So then I could call up with that account number I just disclosed and basically get the SIM transfer over to my device, stuff like that.
So let me back up on that one. So where would you read the JavaScript identifying someone's account number?
Well, so basically they had this page called the Quick Pay page for Verizon, where you would enter a phone number and then you could go into the web page and it would display your bill, you pay it. But if you inspect the code and you look into their HTML, you'll see a variable section, var, and then account number, and then it would disclose the person's account number right there.
They can't encrypt that stuff? Like I would think
they should.
Yeah.
They can. They 100% can encrypt it. It's just in this case, it was a sloppy programmer who just thought, let's just keep that in the public without having encrypted or anything. Actually, there's lots of other alternatives where they didn't even need to have that in the coding at all. That wasn't necessary. I think when they did patch it, I think it did end up coming back encrypted.
Wow. And what would you do with the SIM swapping? The same thing, just getting game accounts? Or what was like the most out there thing you did with the SIM swapping?
Well, originally it was game accounts, and I started transitioning into crypto, targeting altcoin companies and stuff and trying to break into their stuff and steal their crypto. So this is the big transition where my morals were originally games accounts might not be that bad to suddenly I'm thinking, hey, for some reason it's okay to take someone's money. And I think, is a clear moral flaw at that point. If I obviously wouldn't, in my head back then, I would never physically harm someone or point a gun at someone. I wouldn't have been able to do that. So
It's a slippery slope, though. You never.
yeah, exactly.
Games are like your gateway drug, and then you're like, I'm just gonna like look at a few photos from Kim Kardashian. You didn't do that, but and then
Right.
okay, this crypto stuff, that's bullshit anyway. I'm gonna just take some.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when I got into crypto, there was a lot of criminals that were using it. So, I mean, there still are to this day, but it was sort of, I got in like 2012, 2013, and there's a lot of people using it on the deep web and stuff like that. So, in my
So you
opinion,
knew about crypto from the deep web because at this point you're selling the whole process of selling accounts probably brings you into the deep web, right?
yeah, well, I want to be able to sell an account without some person reversing their money on me through PayPal or something. So how do
Right.
I do that? Bitcoin, peer to peer, no one can reverse on me. Once I get that money, it's in my wallet. So I was using crypto as an option for that. Then I would sell the crypto for PayPal to like a trustable source or something.
Wow, that's so interesting. So really, I mean, they always say, first off, they always said this about the internet, not just crypto, that the internet was originally in the 90s, they said the internet was being used for just all sorts of criminal activities and
Right.
whatever. And now it became crypto. I think it's something like less than 1/10 of 1% of transactions are criminal in nature, but that's probably less than the US dollar anyway. But online certainly it's in 2012 to 2014, that was probably the main use of Bitcoin.
Yeah, typically that was it was, peer to peer stuff like that. You couldn't get reversed. I think it was even more so back then, used by a lot of criminals.
So what would you do? Like, how would you hack into crypto stuff?
Well, I would look for backup phrases or private keys. So obviously, private key gives you direct access to the wallet. So I would look for, wallet backups, recovery seeds. I wouldn't be necessarily targeting the exchanges because typically there is good security around that. And typically, most people I would target, like the companies, they wouldn't just trust to have all their money in the exchange. They'd have some sort of backup somewhere.
Right. So when you have a wallet that's a backup, a lot of times people would, you have to know somehow what's called your private key, which is essentially a password into that
Right.
wallet. And a lot of times the private key is like 100 digits and letters and all sorts of stuff, basically make up a phrase that you could put in a database to associate with that private key.
Yeah, there is seed phrases, which could be anywhere from, I think it's like 12 to 21 and even longer. Or you could have your private key, which I mean, you could have either or, but the thing is, people would sometimes maybe go on their iCloud, take a photo of that seed. And well, if your iCloud's connected to the internet, well, now your seed's connected to the internet. So if I get into your iCloud, I suddenly have a photo of your seed right there. Or if you store your seed in a OneDrive file, well, there, I've gone into your Hotmail. Now I can see your recovery seed and get into your wallet.
So let's go through the whole process. So you would know who back in 2012 or 2013, it was sort of rare for someone to have crypto, but you knew people who had crypto because you would see their email addresses on the dark web, for instance.
Typically at that period, I wasn't going after crypto. There was a point in about 2014 where I started looking into crypto a little more, but I had really no idea how to find these people at all. I was literally just going on Google and looking for people with Bitcoin and trying to break into their email. I didn't have like a formula on how to get crypto at that point. It didn't come until years later when I started thinking, like putting two and together how I might better target people or companies.
So what would you do?
So typically I would look at coin market cap and look at the top coin companies and I would go through them, look at back when I was into it, everyone had to announce who they were in crypto. Otherwise you wouldn't be considered reputable. So there was a lot of people that were just publishing their personal information or at least their name and stuff. This is who I am. Trust my coin because of this. And then I would go through and target the sort of heads or the technical guys in that company and try to break into their emails and see if I could see a backup. In some cases, there was a script that they used to automate the sending of the crypto, and obviously it has to pull from somewhere. So the private key was a part of that source code, stuff like that.
And again, they wouldn't encrypt private keys or anything?
Yeah, I mean, for that script to send it out, it would have to pull from a text file somehow. So this was all just like something that you or me could create today with Python or something to send out the money. So they weren't doing it the most secure way.
So you would use your older techniques that like the either the Gmail social engineering or some of these bugs involved in how you format the request to change your password, or you do SIM swapping. You would somehow get a hold of their email account or iCloud account or whatever, and you knew that they had some crypto because they were involved in these various crypto projects. So you would use your old techniques to get access to them.
Yeah, I would, whether it be a bug or an exploit or whether it be social engineering, I would just do whatever it would really take to break into that account.
And roughly what percentage of these accounts would have some information about what their private key was?
The thing is, not a lot would. So there was a lot of misses, but sometimes if it was a company, I could see a list of their pre-sale investors. So now suddenly I have a whole list of people with their address, how much they bought, that I can now individually target.
Right, and they're not going to be the most sophisticated necessarily.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, my biggest successes were with the altcoin companies. So, I mean, keep in mind, even these are major companies. Even if one person slips up, well, that's millions of dollars right there.
This is such a valuable service for all business owners, big businesses, small businesses, doesn't matter. I wish I had this in the many different businesses that I've started. Sometimes it seems like your business is humming, but then suddenly you don't understand it. You're starting to fall behind. You're not understanding where your costs are, where your revenues are, where your payments are. Teams are buried in all sorts of like BS work, and you can't seem to close the books. So you need like one dashboard, one source of truth. I'm jealous of this business, NetSuite from Oracle, of course, NetSuite by Oracle. I wish I'd come up with this idea. It's a brilliant concept to have all your business intelligence on one dashboard. This is why you need to know these three numbers: 37,000, 25, and 1. So 37,000, that's the number of businesses which have upgraded to NetSuite by Oracle. NetSuite is the #1 cloud financial system, streamlining accounting, financial management, inventory, HR, and more. 25. NetSuite turns 25 this year. That's 25 years of helping businesses do more with less, close their books in days, not weeks, and drive down costs. 1, because your business is one of a kind. So you get a customized solution for all of your key performance indicators, your KPIs, in one efficient system with one source of truth. Manage risk, get reliable forecasts, and improve margins. Everything you need to grow all in one place. So right now, download NetSuite's popular KPI checklist designed to give you consistently excellent performance absolutely free at netsuite.com/James. That's netsuite.com/James to get your own KPI checklist. netsuite.com/James. The future of learning is definitely online. Like, it's such BS that you have to spend $200,000 or take $200,000 in loans and go to some fancy school when it's useless. It doesn't guarantee you a job. Most employers, including me, do not care about degrees or grades or anything like that. We want to care that you love what you're doing, that you know what you're doing, in some cases that you have experience or that you're willing to learn. But people in general love learning and are curious. Like, the key to success is curiosity. And I think masterclass.com is the perfect model for online learning. I'm really happy they're sponsoring this episode. If you're going to give a gift, give the gift of learning. Masterclass makes a meaningful gift this season for you and anyone on your list, because both of you can learn from the best to become your best, from leadership to effective communication to cooking. Let me tell you some of the classes I've taken. I've taken comedy from Steve Martin. I mean, can you believe I can take a class from Steve Martin on comedy, or Judd Apatow, my favorite comedy director? I could take an actual class from him on writing. Wolfgang Puck on cooking. Dan Brown on writing, or Judy Bloom, who's been on this podcast, on writing. By the way, Wolfgang Puck also has been on this podcast. It's such a pleasure. I try to take classes all the time from masterclass.com. And whether you're watching Masterclass on TV or listening in audio mode in the app or on their site, the quality speaks for itself. It's like these Masterclass instructors are your own personal mentors that are going to help you reach the next level. How much would it cost to take one-on-one classes on comedy from Steve Martin or on chess from Gary Kasparov? You just wouldn't be able to do it. But it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. With a Masterclass annual membership, it's $10 a month. Memberships start at $120 a year for unlimited access to one-on-one classes with all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. So it's not just $120 for one instructor. You get all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. Boost your confidence and find practical takeaways you can apply to your life and at work. And if you own a business or are a team leader, use Masterclass to empower and create future-ready employees and leaders. That's the real education in today's world. So this holiday season, you can give one annual membership and get one free at masterclass.com/JAS. JAS, of course, stands for the James Altucher Show. So right now you can get 2 memberships for the price of one at masterclass.com/JAS. Masterclass.com/JAS. Offer terms apply. What was the biggest hack you did during that period?
Well, the one I got arrested for was my biggest, which had 20 million in it, but I took 15, then sent 1 mil back. I'm not sure why I didn't take 20. I think I still had some sort of moral, like I don't want to rob them for everything you got, as silly as that sounds, because if I'm robbing 15 million of them, I might as well take the extra 5. But I think there was some moral thing trying to say, hey, we'll not take everything from them.
That's really interesting. It's almost like you self-sabotage yourself in some way.
Exactly.
Like I hate, it's almost a cliche to say you wanted to get caught, because I don't think that's true. But what do you think? What do you think it is?
I mean, I think in a way I was being really reckless. I had actually at that time just broken up with a girlfriend. So I was a little sad about that. I was thinking in my head, I went to a completely other state just to hold the Sims myself and do the whole process, just basically me alone in a hotel room. So I wasn't in the best state of mind. I was being reckless. And when that happened, that was obviously the biggest hit I had ever done. I see 20 million, I'm freaking out. I mean, I had in the past found like a $5 million hit, stuff like that was pretty big, but this was the biggest by far I'd ever seen.
So like, okay, but let's talk about that. Like when you found a $5 million hit, did you suddenly go from being like the regular person to having $5 million? Like, did you spend the 5 million or
no? I basically just kept it in crypto. I cashed out a little, but part of the reason I got a lighter sentence was when I got arrested, I decided to fork up any money I had in my possession that was stolen in order to get a better deal to lighten my sentence. So it was actually benefited me in that case. I wasn't going out partying in LA, which a lot of these people that were doing it were, they were going in LA partying, spending crazy amount of money. Most of the money I got was just saved, just sitting back there.
So and how come you did that? Like, how come you didn't say to yourself, okay, one last step is at least moving it over into, well, I guess you don't want to move it over into dollars because then you have to report to the IRS.
Right,
it's a whole new level of legal. So I guess there's nothing to do. Like that's the issue that remember a few months ago, the 2 people who, the couple who got caught for.
Right, yeah, that big one. Yeah, they were slowly laundering over the course of 5+ years.
Right, it's hard to kind of get the money out of those wallets because people could see the wallets still where they were sent. And they could see when money is moved out of those wallets. So that's part of the problem a little bit.
I mean, there's techniques to avoid the money being traced. For example, laundering through Monero. Monero is a privacy coin that doesn't appear on the blockchain. So the typical idea to clean Bitcoin is you get Bitcoin if you can get into Monero, then send the Monero to another address, then that blockchain transaction is hidden. Then send that Monero to another Monero address and use that Monero address to buy whatever crypto you want. And then suddenly the paper trail's gone right there.
But to get it from Bitcoin to Monero, you have to sign up for an exchange or something, right?
So what I would do is I typically had a friend who knew a bunch of Germans, and I would basically pay him a little money to get these people to sign up for German Binance's accounts and stuff like that. So then they would give me their Binance. They would give him the Binance. I would buy it off him, and I would use that Binance account to like launder the money.
I see. So they never, if they were ever asked, they would have no idea who you were.
Right, exactly. And he didn't know who I was exactly either.
So I see. And then from there, from Binance, you go into Monero, and then you're clean. So how much did you kind of clear and spend altogether during this period before the 20 million one?
I would say over 10 I was involved with. Obviously, there was other people involved that got their share cuts for doing certain parts too.
Like how many people were involved altogether? Were you running the whole thing?
Yeah, I was sort of at the time running, but the thing is, I had people that would just sit in a call with me, and I would just give them a bunch of money for essentially just watching me do most of the work. So I don't know. There was certain other people involved, but a lot of those people have got arrested too, like Joel Ortiz and stuff, which I'm not sure if you heard the name, but first ever SIM swap arrest. So
Because you were using SIM swaps initially as one of the ways to get the initial email addresses.
yeah, not all. It wasn't always a SIM swap, but that was a reliant technique that I could fall back on.
And so when you got this $20 million one, like what was your goal during this period? Like, did you say, I'm going to just get 10 million in the bank and then I'm going to disappear?
I didn't. I'm not quite sure at that point. At first, it was like, oh, I have 2 to 3 million. That's fine for now. I'm just going to take a break. But then crypto starts crashing in 2018. So now I'm suddenly thinking, hey, maybe I could get a little more. And I'm getting a sense of I mean, it's a big rush. You make millions of dollars overnight just quickly in a step like that. It's like it's sort of you get a rush of energy. So I'm enjoying doing it. But I'm also kind of starting to shy off. I didn't have a set number though. I was just kind of doing it. And when my crypto dropped, I would keep doing it.
Did you ever think, hey, I might get caught. I need kind of an escape plan?
Yeah, that started to appear when the first person got arrested. Because keep in mind, we were doing this for a while and no one had got arrested. But when Joel Ortiz got arrested, who was a close friend of mine, that's when I started, really starting to be hesitant. But at that same time, crypto had dropped so much that I was still looking to make maybe just one more big one and then just chilling out for a while.
That one more big one always gets people.
Exactly.
What was your escape plan?
I hadn't thought that far out yet, man. I was hoping to just slowly launder the money into dollars. I didn't really have a game plan for that yet. It was sort of
Like you didn't think, okay, I'll move to Switzerland where there's no extradition or something like that?
It wasn't even like that. I didn't have a game plan like that yet. Nothing like that. I just was staying at home. I had a house with 4 roommates. It wasn't like I was a high profile or anything. I mean, I'm paying maybe $300 a month for rent, stuff like that.
Did anyone know, like, did girlfriends or your roommates, did anyone know, like, how much potential you had in the accounts?
My roommates definitely knew something was up, but they didn't know the full details of exactly what I had.
Like, when they asked you what you did for a living, what would you say?
I mean, they knew I did something with crypto, maybe an investor, which wasn't too unbelievable at the time when stuff was pumping up.
What about girlfriends?
Yeah, my girlfriend knew sort of what I was doing, but she didn't know I was still actively doing it.
I see. So it wasn't like a glamour thing really where you were using it to attract people.
No, no, I was mostly just living, still eating McDonald's pretty often, stuff like that. I wasn't going to 5-star restaurants or going to LA and buying Rolexes.
So it was really kind of like the thrill of the chase a little bit, which almost sounds like a cliche also, but maybe it's a combination of that and just it was hard to kind of sort of the next step is always kind of getting this money into your hands, and that it's always a little harder than people think.
Yeah, it definitely is. There were some people that took the approach of just straight up cashing out and saying they were Bitcoin investors and just hoping the IRS didn't say anything. And for all I know, that might have worked for some people, but I was doing the more process of thinking of a slow way to get it into my bank, stuff like that.
And so this $20 million thing happens, and what happens next?
So I'm freaking out because it's 20 million. Like I said, I sent 5 million back and I send them an email saying, hey, you're an altcoin company. If you don't want us to crash your coin, then give us like 8 million in Bitcoin and I'll send you all 15 million back and you can keep your coin. And as a sign of good faith, I've sent you 1 million back. So now if you send us 8 million, I'll send you the rest back.
Now, did you do this because their coin, it was a smaller coin, so was their coin not liquid enough that you could really cash out of it?
I could cash out of it, but I would be coming out. If I had done it like all through, I probably would have only got, I would have got millions, but it would have been a lot less than that 15 million amount.
Right, because you would have crashed the coin or...
Right.
Okay. And so how did they respond?
They didn't respond. Instead, they got the police involved, or the React Task Force, which is a computer task force based in San Jose. And they hopped on that quick. They got the Secret Service involved. They started. I messed up. My IP got attached briefly. I don't know if the hotel Wi-Fi cut out or what, but because I thought I had done everything perfect, but somehow that hotel IP got revealed to them. They subpoenaed the hotel. They got the name Joseph Harris, which they must have already heard from people that already got arrested that might be someone named Joseph Harris named Doc. So I think my name was already sort of on a watch list. So when I slipped up, it was pretty easy for them to put two and two get together that, oh wow, 14 million just got hacked here. Someone that we have a name of interest in is staying at that hotel.
Okay, so they got your so because you sent an email to the company, they were able to trace that and find an IP address.
Not from the email. I think it was through the process of when I was signing into that person's Gmail. I think for some, I don't know if my VPN disconnected or what happened exactly, but I guess for a brief moment, my hotel's IP was exposed on the account.
That's smart of them to check not only where the email's coming from, but who logged into that email from where.
Yeah, exactly. They're very, very good.
How do they get that info? Do they have a deal with Google or something?
I think I would say they definitely have some sort of. I mean, if they can get the Secret Service over here quick, I think they do have good connections with Google.
Yeah. I wonder how much of Google's stuff is just free flowing back and forth with the government.
I would say a great deal, if I had to say, just based off my experience, how they were able to get all my Gmails and all that. They definitely got some sort of good deal with them.
And so then what happened? You're staying at this hotel. Do they just knock on your door?
Well, actually, I've done it, but I'm feeling a little off. I'm feeling a little off about everything. So I'm like, I call up my cousin. I'm like, hey, can you pick me up from Oklahoma? I'm feeling a little off about this. Can you come pick me up? And he was like aware of what was going on. He wasn't involved, but my cousin is someone who I had trusted with what I was doing. So I told him the story, and then we're like, okay, we'll get out of here. We stop at a gas station, and that's when Secret Service pulls out guns. They're undercover at the time. So at first I thought I was getting robbed because someone just undercover points a gun at the car, says, get out of the car. Then they cuff me, and then they say, okay, Secret Service. And that's where they arrest me.
Wow. Did your cousin get arrested also?
Yes, he did actually. He's in the mugshot and stuff, but they released him after 2 days because they realized he didn't have anything to do with it. He wasn't even in Oklahoma when it happened.
And then what did they do with you?
Well, what they did to me was they sent me to the state of California where the crime was committed because the victim was a California citizen. So I'm extradited from Oklahoma, which isn't in my home state, to California, brought on a plane, taken to California, and then I do the rest of my time there, work out a deal where if I give up all my money and I'll have a probation period, and if I commit any more crimes, obviously I'll be back in here, which I obviously passed, and I got sentenced.
So what was your sentence?
My sentence was 16 months with halftime. So I did 16 months, but California law for non-violent offenders, they get out in 8 months. So you get basically, if you get a year, you do 6 months. If you get 16 months, that's 8 months. So I got out after 8 months' time.
Wow. And what kind of jail was it?
It was a place called Elmwood. It was in Santa Clara. It was obviously pretty boring. In prison you might get more activities, but jail I was just staying there. But I wasn't being sent away for enough time. Basically, the whole process of me getting sentenced had taken already like 7 months. So they just kept me in jail for another month.
I see. So in jail, you're just in a cell. Are you in a cell by yourself? Do you have a roommate?
I'm in dorm room environment. So there's basically a bunch of mats set together, and you just sleep. There's a little day room you can go to, but it's not like have a bunkie or anything. It's just basically just a room with a bunch of people sleeping.
And are there guards in the room?
Yeah, there are guards outside the door and at the desk of the room. And they kind of
imagine if one person wants to be angry at another person or kill
there was lots of fights. I mean, it would happen a couple times a week where someone would get a little violent. I never got any fights. I got along with most of the guys, but there definitely were some hotheads that got some fights.
How would you avoid the fights? Like, how would you make sure everything was calm all the time?
I mean, I just they said I was really mature for my age, at least what they said, and I just was chill to everyone. If someone might be having a bad day at commissary, I might give them some of my chips or something. I was just generally just cool with everyone.
I see. So, okay. So when did you get out, and how old were you?
I got out. Well, I spent my 22nd birthday in jail. I got out. I went got arrested in 2018. Finally got out summer 2019. So I was 22 at the time, and I got out. That. I was best day ever. Well, it felt like the best day ever.
Did your parents pick you up? Like, what were they thinking at this time?
Well, my parents are very understanding. You know, they felt like they might have done something wrong, which obviously they didn't. I was just someone who got way in over my head, and my morals sort of got stricken from me. But they came to pick me up, you know, hugged my mom. She took me back to Missouri.
Okay, so summer 20. It's a good thing you weren't in captivity in, March of 2020.
Oh, yeah, with COVID and stuff.
Because then they might have kept you there just in case.
Yeah, I missed it by a year, it looks like.
So what did you start? You obviously, I mean, did you go to college or anything, or?
No, I just sort of started looking into bug bounties more. I mean, I took a break period where I wasn't really doing much. Moved back with my mom, but then I started doing bug bounties a bit more, and that's sort of what I've been doing for a while.
So a bug bounty is when a company posts on various websites, hey, if you find a bug on our products or on our website, we'll pay you.
Yeah, and obviously I had already had previous experience with that from doing it as a black hat, finding bugs in like T-Mobile and exploiting them to leak user data and stuff like that.
So like what's like a legit bug bounty that you did?
Well,
first off, where's a good site to find bug bounties?
I mean, hackerone.com is a really good site. You can make a profile there, and there's a lot of different programs you can use. Like, I think most companies are there, like Yahoo's through there. Basically, all the big tech companies, a lot of them issue their bounties through HackerOne.
And so I'm on hackerone.com right now. How do I see what companies are offering? You probably have to sign up.
Yeah, I think you have to sign in, but I think you have to go sign in. If you go to HackerOne/Hacktivity, I think you don't have to be signed in to see recent reports. So HackerOne.com/Hacktivity, like right here, we see HTTP request smuggling with origin rules. We see API doc exploits as an active token. So typically, I look for stuff like that and report them.
So here I see something: signed in with Apple works on existing accounts, bypasses 2FA. What is that? What sort of thing does that mean?
I had to guess, that doesn't seem like it should be worth much, but I'm guessing if you sign in with Apple, you can bypass two-step essentially. Like, it doesn't ask you for the code. So instead of signing in and ask for two-step, then I use sign in with Apple. I can bypass that two-factor authentication, which $1,000 for that seems a bit high, to be honest. So
this is some company who noticed this problem, and he's trying to figure out how it happened.
Well, it looks like it's by Matty PV4, and he did a Cloudflare, which is a major company, so that explains more why the bounties. But it looks like he's done some other things. Signing with Apple generates long life JWT, which means that the JWT is going to last for a while, which is typically can be considered a flaw.
I see. So he's describing what the flaw is. Don't you just have to find the flaw? Or I'm trying to understand.
I mean, so typically you find the flaw, but then they're going to want a good write-up explaining it, because, if you don't explain how it works good enough, they're not going to understand it. So typically what I'll do is I'll show a video documentation. I actually have a YouTube channel where I disclose a lot, show some examples if you want me to link it for you.
Yeah, we'll promote your YouTube channel the notes to the thing. So here's one. Here's a Department of Defense one: unauthorized access to internal server panel without authentication. So is this a hacker who's posting to the Department of Defense about a problem that they're not aware of?
Yes, this is someone. Department of Defense has a bounty program through HackerOne, so this guy is reporting it. Over here, reflected XSS via something parameters. So someone's been able to pull off an XSS, which is a vulnerability to the U.S. Department of Defense as well.
And this is like a $5,000 one, I think. Let me just see. I skipped it.
Not sure that one shows it. Here's let me see if I can see any high value.
Here's a PlayStation one, $20,000.
Oh yeah, that's pretty exploit chain.
Yeah. So what does it mean? It allows an attacker to gain JIT capabilities and execute arbitrary payloads. What does that mean?
Well, if I can execute an arbitrary payload, basically I'm able to do stuff that, like an attacker payload, I'm not supposed to be able to do that, but I'm essentially able to just activate something, an exploit payload, which can run on the server. I'd have to look into it more to see the exact details on it.
But like you could run code on the PlayStation
Yeah,
server or
it
on the
looks like
on a console.
I see it now. It says it's a weakness, privilege escalation. So privilege escalation is when I'm a regular user and I'm able to do privileges of, like, say, an admin, or basically do higher privilege things. Like if you're an admin, you're able to do admin functions. If I'm a regular user, I shouldn't be able to do those admin functions. So it looks like what he's able to do is act as if he's a higher level privileged user. So basically, he's readjusting a parameter and sending malicious code instead, which allows him to do higher access things.
Like what's a higher access thing?
I'm still reading into it to see exactly what he's doing here. There's a lot to it.
Oh, he says it's possible to ship pirated games on Blu-ray discs.
Yeah, something like that. That's not typically the kind of vulnerabilities I look into, but yeah, that's a possibility.
Like what's some of the ones that you've done?
Some of the ones I've done, like there's typically, I found a Microsoft one recently, which was an IDOR, which I was able to expose any user's like email address plus their linked IDs, stuff like that. I typically look for stuff like that, information disclosures, broken access control. Broken access control is just a broad category that summarizes when I'm able to perform unwanted functions as a regular user. Or for example, like I explained earlier with the Twitter thing, if I'm able to send tweet as another person's user ID, that's broken access control. Typically they arise when there's not properly set like authorization headers.
So someone made a website and maybe they used Microsoft's web server software. I forgot what it's called.
Right.
And they didn't finish setting it up, or they didn't set the access control correctly, which is
probably, maybe they use OAuth or something, and they didn't set the bearer token to be specific to the user account. So suddenly I can use my bearer token that was just generated to access other people's user accounts or perform actions on them.
I see. It's fascinating. And then, like, how much did that bug bounty pay?
That one paid about $2K, so it's nothing too crazy, but it was a $2K bounty.
How were you able to find it?
I actually was using Burp Suite to monitor the HTTP traffic, and I saw that there was in the request that had the user parameter as me, and I looked into sort of Xbox a little more, and because it was an Xbox related one for Microsoft, and then I decided to try. I noticed in their dev resources they use XUID and then the XUID, which is a user ID right there. So then I modified the me parameter with a basically someone else's XUID, and it let me view their information instead.
Wow. So, and that's kind of a pretty, so so you basically have like a bag of tricks, and for every one of these bug bounties, you could try your various tricks to see if it kind of gets you the access that exposes the problem.
Yeah, and keep in mind, my area of expertise is web hacking, so I do a lot of, and specifically, I love stuff relating to accounts, because obviously that's what I used to do, and that's what I've been into. So stuff that leads to account information being disclosed, bypassing stuff like two-factor authentication. Recently, do you know ProtonMail?
Yeah.
So I recently found...
Which is kind of a privacy email.
Yeah, and I recently found a way to bypass two-factor authentication. You probably know the term race condition or race hazard if you were doing stuff in the 90s.
Yeah.
So what I basically with their two-factor authentication code, it would be a GAuth code that you would have to type in. They were 6 digits. Now, what I decided to test for was something called race condition, where I send multiple concurrent requests, and after 3 wrong tries, the session times out and your session ID becomes invalid. But what I figured out, if I send multiple concurrent requests at once, I was able to bypass that rate limit and suddenly leverage more attempts per code. So what I would do was I'd basically run a bunch of concurrent requests trying to brute force that code, and I would send those requests all at once. And when the correct code is gotten, then I'm access privileges to the API, and so I can read the mail calls, all that stuff. So
wow, so you basically had like 10 plus years experience like learning this stuff. If someone wanted to learn like what you know, how would they learn it?
Like I said, portswigger.net. There's a lot of labs, but some of them are out there. There's Try to Hack Me. Try Hack Me. There's a lot of resources online. I feel like I learned a lot by just messing around with sort of just seeing how things function first. Just because keep in mind, when I started, I wasn't even reading resources. I was just literally looking at HTTP traffic, seeing, oh, what happens if I modify this, or what happens if I change this user ID to this. And then that prompted me to more look into resources. Portswigger.net, there's some good resources there for web hacking. It really depends. Obviously, there's different fields like, there's exploit dev, which I don't really know much about, which is developing the malicious code to exploit websites. My expertise is web hacking. So portswigger.net's good for web hacking.
I mean, you should teach a course or something, or I feel like you could start a security company, like take all of your things that you know, and you could probably do a sweep of every website to see if those problems exist.
Yeah, I've considered doing it. I would love to have something where someday I could focus on specifically account takeover related techniques and stuff that exposes user data, as well as go over just social engineering techniques as well, help companies provide for both. So
Yeah, like have you ever considered reaching out to companies and saying, look, for $10,000 one-time fee, I'll do a complete sweep, and then $5,000 a month maintenance.
Yes, that's definitely something I wanted to do. Like sometimes when I find a bug, I might reach out to the media a little just to get my name more. What I want is my name to be more cemented as a white hat. And once that happens, I feel like I have enough good reputation to be able to say, hey, I did do some bad stuff, but I know what I'm talking about. And I'm now I've changed my ways. I'm willing to help you now. Stuff like that.
Okay, here's what you should do. You should write a book, because first off, even though a book is offline and the real world and so on, it still has legitimacy.
Right.
You should write a book called The White Hat Bible. You should explain in the beginning what you just said. Hey, I've done some wrong stuff, but now I'm totally white hat. And then you should kind of give every technique that you have, like 1 through 50 or whatever, and just very clearly, simple language, explain what it is, how to do it, how to find more info about it, and just publish the White Hat Bible and do a new version every year. So people have to buy it every year. And then look, and then at the back, you say, hey, if anybody needs specific consulting or has specific questions, reach out to my company, whitehatsolutions.com, and, blah, blah, blah.
That works. Hey, you now just gave me $1 million pitch right there. So you never know.
A, who wouldn't buy the book who works in security? And B, who wouldn't hire you afterwards if they have questions, if they're in over their heads?
Yeah, and after I did the Darknet Diaries, I actually had a decent amount of people reach out to me on Twitter, which, of course, you were one of them, or your team was.
Yeah.
But just asking about how did I get into it and stuff. And, someone asked if they had found a bug here. I was like, oh, no, not quite. But he still gave him some tips on what he was seeing on his screen.
Now this is not related to account takeovers, but how many companies out there, percentage-wise, do you think are infected by bots of some sort?
That I wouldn't be the right person to give you numbers on that. I will say that there are a lot of companies don't have proper rate limits when it comes to bots. So a lot of companies, I would say, like Twitter, there can be bots for Twitter. I would say a decent amount. I wouldn't be able to give you exact numbers because that's not necessarily my area. But just from what I know, like I could, for example, if I wanted to make a Twitter bot, I could do that right now, stuff like that.
Because you just know so many sites related to all this stuff that you know where all the skeletons are.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I know what to look for if I was to do that.
That could be a chapter in your book, how to make a Twitter bot.
Yeah, for sure.
So, well, Joseph Harris, you have such an amazing story. I'm glad you are on the good side of things.
Me too.
And but were you, when they arrested you, were you like literally like, did you cry? Like, what did you do?
I didn't cry. I just had sort of a thought like, wow, like, what have I done? When they know what you've done and they've got you solid to the gun, it's just sort of a time reflection. I'm very grateful to the prosecutors for the sentence I got, which in my opinion was a little light. I do think me giving up all the funds and stuff contributed to it, but it was a real eye-opener for me, and I'm just glad that experience happened in the way it did because I was able to learn from it. I was able to get sort of my morals back and just realize how terrible what kind of that stuff does and how financially devastating it is to the people that are impacted by it.
Oh my gosh. So were you bailed out at all for any amount of time?
My bail, get this, it was set at $14 million, which that's got to be some sort of California record or something.
I guess because you were talking about so many millions of dollars, they don't know if this is the only thing you've got or if you got 100 million stashed away in Switzerland, and you probably were an escape risk.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I agree with that. I mean, do I think 14? Yeah, exactly. The judge did, after a few months, lower it to 1 million, but there was still no way I was going to pay for that.
Yeah, right. Because you gave all the money back.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you did, actually, maybe that was even a trick. Maybe if you did give back, maybe if you did pay 1 million for bail, they would ask you, "Hey, you lied to us. You told us you." So that could have been a trick.
Yeah, I just gave up everything I had to my lawyer and just told my lawyer exactly which wallets I had used, just so it's clear, because I didn't want them thinking I was hiding anything, because, oh, you've given up millions of dollars, but now are you hiding something more? I don't want to give them any reason to say, hey, we don't think you've given up all the money.
Well, good luck. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast and talking about this. What's your YouTube channel?
My YouTube channel, I'd have to give you the channel URL. It doesn't have a custom URL, but can I link that in the chat? Let me see if there's an option for that.
But if I search YouTube, how would I find you?
It's this YouTube. I would look up. You can look up to find my channel. I would just search up Gmail/Google sign up 0 day, and I think my channel would come up pretty quick.
Oh yeah, Joseph Harris. You're the first result. I'm telling you, write the White Hat Bible. Has anyone written a book with that title?
I don't know. You should maybe copyright that too. Maybe you'll get some royalty fees if I do.
No, nobody's done it. It's all yours, man. And then set up like $1 million consulting firm. You've got the skills.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that.
So come on the podcast anytime. Next time there's a big hack, we'll have you on. You could explain how it was done.
For sure, anytime. It was a pleasure, James.
Pleasure here. Thank you, Joseph.
Thank you.
Your daily dose of gaming just got way more epic with the Snapdragon processor powering the Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra. Snapdragon processors give you the premium mobile experience that triggers your inner champion. Whenever you want, wherever you want. Get ready for edge-of-your-seat performance, advanced customizations, ultra-realistic graphics, and adrenaline-boosting speeds that have the power to move you in more ways than one. Follow us on Instagram at Snapdragon Official.
Luxury is meant to be livable. Discover the new leather collection at Ashley with premium quality leather sofas, recliners, and more, all built to last. No matter how many spills, scuffs, or pet-related mishaps come its way, the leather collection at Ashley is made with the durability you need for the whole family. Shop the new leather collection at Ashley and find chairs starting at $499.99 and sofas at $599.99. Ashley, for the love of home.